Uh, anyway, the first question I have for you is I'm interested in Lucky Us. Was that an autobiographical album? And if so, what brought you to a place where you felt you needed to make that record?
Yeah, completely autobiographical. In fact, it's the description of my childhood and my um, journey, as it were. I mean, including my cancer
Hmm.
troubles. And you know the story of the Japanese gardener? A Japanese gardener will go out and he won't add anything. He'll take things away. And there's a river, a little stream, and it goes past these stones and it makes a sound. And he'll on a particular day remove a stone, change the sound, and be happy with his day's work. Lucky Us is in basically piano, my vocal, and some very sparse orchestration. And it took me 4 years. I worked on that for 4 years to get it that simple by removing stones. It started off as an album with guitar, bass, drums, choir, saxophone, whatever, and ended up. I think there's a trumpet in a song, and the rest is just me on uh, orchestra in a box, trying to tell stories that are actually in the simplest possible way. Now, the next album I do is going to be even simpler
Hmm.
because it's already too busy for me. But it's a the first production credit that Rick Rubin got was not producer; it was reducer.
Okay.
And I'm kind of on looking for the simplest way to express the most complex emotion.
Yeah, yeah.
That was pretty wordy, but I really, I really think I nailed that in that contest. It was 4 years ago, and I think I'll nail it a little harder on the next attempt.
Well, I think you certainly did. I mean, listening to some of your keyboard work over the years, I'm just interested. You were playing at a time when progressive rock was a big thing as well. I'm just
Yeah,
thinking, Rick Wakeman and Tony Banks. Did they appear on your radar at all as influence?
Wakeman for sure. Tony Banks later. I didn't really get how good Tony Banks was until Genesis, till Peter Gabriel had left, and I mean I could really all of a sudden I really hear what he was doing. He's brilliant. Uh, Matthew Fisher was always my favorite guy, and he plays really simply. Whiter Shade of Pale is a perfect record.
Yeah,
Um, and Wakeman, of course, was on everybody's radar. And Yes was so popular. I played progressive type keyboards basically out of necessity.
uh-huh.
I'm a country musician. I'm from Fresno, California, and Floyd Kramer, the American country piano player.
Yeah, yeah.
He'd be my biggest influence, and
Wow.
Jackson Brown will tell you the same thing. But was in a situation. I was 20, I guess, and there was a call for heavy Hammond organ and kind of proggy synthesizers, so I rose to the occasion.
Yeah. um, uh, the song "Now That You're Gone," Joe Cocker, you co-wrote that with him. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
yeah,
What,
and produced it. That's yeah. So
I'm interested. What was he like? What was he like to work with?
well, I'd known him before. I'd known him in when I was living in Los Angeles in '73, and he'd go on the road with his band, and I had a key to his house because he had a grand piano rented in his. He was renting a house in West Hollywood, and I go there and just dig around on the piano, and nobody there but me. So I'd known Joe, and I live in Germany, and I have done for 45 years, and this happened a lot in the 80s. An artist would be touring Germany, and Now That You're Gone was a soundtrack for a German film. It
Hmm.
was the theme song for a huge German film. And Joe happened to be on tour, and his label uh, um, in Germany was EMI at the time. And Joe's kind of his, he wasn't even thinking of me, and we hadn't seen each other in ages, and but his kind of only requisite be that it be somebody that speaks good English
Okay.
that to produce. And I a lot of the production work I got because of just the fact that I'm American, or and can communicate and have maybe the same sense of humor. Joe was lovely. It was one of the he was in a really, really good place. He wasn't his he had some off years. This was a really good year, and he was in a good, happy place.
Yeah.
And we you want to hear a story of the session? It's a great story.
Go on then.
So I met him in a bar, in a hotel bar in Hamburg. I flew up. I live in Munich, and flew up to Hamburg and met him. And he says, "Just said, you remember me? Oh, hey, how you doing? Yeah, good. So we're going to do this song on such and such a date." And he was on the road uh, doing concerts. So he rolls up to the studio on the date in his tour bus with 15 people, and Michael Lang, the guy that promoted Woodstock.
Wow.
And that knocked me out. I was like pretty starstruck, and I've met a lot of big rock stars. Michael Lang. Hey, so we spent all day. We had a great band. I didn't play. I think I played maybe some hammer, but he had great band, great background singers, great everything. But his voice was blown out. I mean, he was in on the road shape, but not studio shape. And you to do a keeper lead vocal, something you stand up, 10 years later. You need to rest before you do that. And he'd been singing every night. So what we did was, it was obvious that we weren't going to keep his vocal. After the bottom track was done, he did a vocal. Okay, great. And the band said, "Okay, great session. We'll see you guys next time you hit town." The band drove into Munich, which was an hour in a bus, put Joe to bed, and they all came back to the studio. And we did the background vocals. I did some stuff on the drums, because this is a one-day thing, and we'd been there for 12 hours already. And it's after midnight, and the band comes back without Joe, and we finish the overdubs and get everything shipshape. And eventually I just sent him at the time we were working on 2-inch multi-track tape. I just shipped the tape to Santa Barbara and said, "Joe, you did a great job. I know you can do it better now." And he did. He went to a studio in Santa Barbara and did it in, half an hour. Because I thought it was hilarious. And we weren't trying to trick him or anything, or bullshit him, but he reckoned it was, he was in a I'm on tour mode, which means, kicking ass every night. And he said, "Oh, this is great, it's great." And it was great, but it's just his voice was kind of shot.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Absolutely. You've done a lot of soundtrack work. I mean, do you prefer doing soundtrack work over, say, standard sort of rock and roll songs?
I like making records.
Okay.
I had a string in the 80s uh, of about 10 singles in a row, and 7 of them charted in America, and a couple of them in Germany and Scandinavia and whatever. And I've been touring a lot. And we're up to 1985. And I started getting production work, and including film scoring, and people asked me to do this and that. And I love being in the studio. And I always got kind of got the feeling I don't have a immortal voice. I'm not one of these cast iron, you can sing 6 nights a week singer.
Yeah.
The lifestyle choices that one made in the 80s weren't conducive to singing a show, traveling, and being fresh the next day. I mean, I'd go 2-3 days without sleeping sometimes. And I really like making records. And I always had the impression, to a degree, that I felt like a dancing bear doing these shows, like a club full of drunks or a festival full of drunks. And you come, you do your thing, and you could be anybody or nobody. It doesn't matter, because they're there to be in the club. And you're gonna have people that are there to like pay attention. You're gonna have them, sure, but the rest of the room is gonna be, they don't care who's on stage. And
Mm.
tickets were cheap in those days. They weren't, hundreds of dollars. We're talking about 40 years ago.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I kind of made a conscious decision that plus I was married and I had a child, a small child at home, and I'm not going to drag them around the world. We're based in Germany.
Hmm.
And I really like being in the studio. And
Yeah.
I get asked, well, what happened? Why did you disappear in 1986? Well, I didn't disappear. I just kind of went behind the scenes.
Yeah. You're like the hard rock version of Brian Wilson.
Yeah, or J.D. Salinger,
Yeah.
you know.
I mean, talking about records, you said you like making records. I mean, does it surprise you that Rising is held in such high esteem? And are you proud of your contribution you made on that record, especially Tarot Woman, perhaps?
I'm not proud of anything. Pride is one of the seven deadly sins. I'm grateful that I was in a position where I could do that.
Okay.
AA teaches us this stuff, and I've known it for a long time. But no, pride is not a word I would use. Astonishing how well Rising's held up. I mean, if anything, it's getting more. The myth is expanding as time goes by. We weren't that big of a band. I
No.
mean, in Japan, I mean, commercially, it was selling. We played what was called the Hammersmith Odeon.
Oh,
Now
yeah, that's right.
it's the Apollo or something.
Yeah, that's right.
But whatever, that's where we were playing. We played we played 2,000 seat, sometimes 3,000 seat, except for Japan and Australia, and Richie was Richie, and we filled the Budokan 3 nights in a row. But that was the exception. So we weren't that big. We opened for Jethro Tull. We opened for Heart in
Hmm.
America, and I feel sorry, poor Jethro Tull, poor Heart. But so the myth has grown rather than diminished, which is gratifying and astonishing to me.
How did you find opening for Jethro Tull?
Brilliant. I'm in a band with Ian
Uh-huh.
Anderson,
Yeah.
a project, and in fact, we're in the studio this week. It's called Soulmates, and well, Simon Phillips is on drums, and Ian's on flute. Al Di Meola is on guitar. Randy Brecker on trumpet.
Mhm.
I play Hammond and sing. Nick Eade from Cutting Crew sings,
Okay.
and we've had Chris Thompson before he
Yeah.
retired sang. Bobby Kimball, Chaka Khan,
Hmm.
a Spice Girl. I mean,
A Spice Girl.
yeah, Mel C,
Okay. She's the
great,
sport. She the sporty one.
the Sporty Spice. Yes,
That's it, right? Yes.
she was fantastic. She had such a great sense of humor because we kind of do this outside jazz rock fusion thing
Hmm.
where the songs could be really really long, old school, and there's all these 70-year-old dinosaurs like myself just having fun, and
Yeah.
so Mel C took it with a lot of humor, and I danced on stage with her. I was one of the high points. But Heart I think they had a problem because we blew the roof off, and then they were a great band. I mean, of
Yeah.
course they had Barracuda, I think, at the time.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think they probably were a little nervous about following us because
Really.
we blew the place down.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um. Okay. I mean, Roger Glover. Interesting. He describes Stargazer as the pillar of Rainbow's career. Do you agree?
When you say Rainbow's career, I have no idea what Rainbow did of other than the stuff that I participated in, which was Rainbow Rising and Long Live Rock and Roll.
Mhm.
I left in the middle of that,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I've never heard any of the other albums through. I didn't like the poppy singles particularly, but I know exactly why Richie wanted to do that. I don't know. That's not my decision to make what a pinnacle is. It's a unusual song. It's the best slide guitar solo I ever heard in my life, and it's Roddy's like a genius on that song. But I don't know. I know Roger was in the band and produced it, as a matter of fact, the band, and wrote lyrics for the band in a later incarnation.
Yeah.
It's funny. It's funny that he doesn't say "All Night Long" is the culminant high point of Rainbow's career, because
Yeah.
that's one he wrote and produced.
Well, I think it's funny. I think amongst Rainbow fans, and I don't profess to speak for all Rainbow fans, I think most of them look at that Dio eras being the most magical of eras for that band. But
It's got certainly got the biggest aura around it. You know,
oh,
just spooky thing with that fabulous cover art and
yeah, yeah.
made for a T-shirt. You know, so yeah.
Absolutely. Interesting. David Coverdale described Richie Blackmore as an interesting bunch of guys. What do you think he means by that?
That's really fun. Coverdale's a funny guy. I don't know. I've met him. I don't know him. I'd like to know what he thinks. But I was astounded at his transformation. We saw him we all trooped down to the Long Beach Arena,
Right.
and Tommy Bolin was on guitar right before he died, and Glenn and David, and they all looked like a bunch of like beasts, hair out to here and everything. And then 10 years later, David's made this transformation, you know, and he looks great. He's got this hot girlfriend, and he's doing In the Heat of the Night, and you know, he's selling millions and millions of records. So that I respect David. He's one of my favorite singers. Uh-huh. I wouldn't try to define Richie by anything other than, I tell you what, I really respect him because he's not there for the money. He's there for the music, like all the good ones are. Okay. He could have cleaned up by either staying with Deep Purple or continuing Rainbow, and he could have been playing, you know, filling arenas all around the world. And he said in 1975, he says, "No, I want to play, you know, the lute in a medieval band, basically." And he used to carry a cello around. You know, he wasn't posing; he meant it. Yeah. And so he hung up the Stratocaster and threw away the Marshalls or put them in the garage, and has, you know, Blackmore's Night, and completely you're either in it. He's in it for the right reason. I guess what I'm trying to say. He walks the walk and doesn't really talk the talk. It's hard to figure out what he's up to sometimes, but he's certainly a musician's musician in that. I mean, if he decided he wanted to do ballet or kids ballads or campfire music, whatever, he did it. That's the point.
And he was a big fan of Jethro Tull as well.
Huge fan. Yeah. Ian tells me some Richie stories.
I'll have to press Ian for those. I mean, if I interview him next, I'll have to press him for those. But Richie was a big fan of Abba as well, apparently.
Well, who wasn't? Yeah. They were fabulous. I mean,
great songwriting, I think.
I mean, the whole package, you know, Dancing Queen and the two knockouts in the front, and the songwriting and arranging, and one of the first bands to 70s bands to like really utilize the studio. They'd record everything with I know this from stories, and I know people that know, I know Swedish people that know that. They record everything, have the record ready, and then they start over. And all they would keep from having would be those vocal tracks, because that's all they were really after. And then they would go at it like one thing at a time and craft these productions. And as I said, I really like to make records, and I really appreciate it when somebody's that dedicated. That's why Dancing Queen is, or SOS, whatever, Waterloo, any of those. There's who doesn't like Abba? It's like who doesn't like Beyonce?
They're just magnificent, absolutely. Interestingly, in Dio's autobiography, he says that Richie picked on you more than most, and Martin Popoff quotes you as saying, "It got nasty, violent, and unpredictable." I mean, how bad did it get for you in Rainbow?
Bad enough that I left. I mean, he fired me twice and then couldn't get a replacement, so I had to hire me back. And I was 21. I mean, I was oblivious to a lot of stuff. It got bad enough that I finally said I've had it, and actually left the honky chateau outside of Paris where we were doing Long Live Rock and Roll at like 4 a.m. with a taxi, and went right to the airport and see you later. And I haven't seen him since. And this was in 1977. So.
Right. I mean, you rejoined for Long Live Rock and Roll. Was that a difficult decision for you to make?
I didn't rejoin. As far as I know, maybe somebody knows a different version of the story. But I mean, they just said we're doing an album, and I showed up. I was shocked to show up and find that Jimmy Bain was gone,
Yeah.
because that's the best rock and roll bass player I ever worked with, and a really great guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I didn't. But like I say, Richie paid for all of that. It was his risk, and he didn't take a lot of money from Polydor. In fact, they made their own label distributed by Polydor. Richie was paying that whole thing for that ridiculous 3,000 light bulb state of the art light show, and everybody's salaries and everybody's travel and studio costs. I mean, he was like picking up the tab. So that's all his business. Who he wants in a band.
Yeah.
I wasn't aware that if I'd been fired prior to Long Live Rock and Roll, then I'll have to edit my story. I was fired 3 times and left once.
Yeah, is your story referenced at all in LA Connection? I've read that. I don't know if there's any truth in that.
No idea. I've read it too, but I don't know. I don't think I've heard the song. I'm not kidding. I don't really listen to any Rainbow music, but music in general. I've never heard the one with Graham. I've heard the singles, of course. I never heard the ones with Joe. Except the singles, and these are all friends of mine. Joe's a friend of mine. Doogie's a friend of mine. I never heard what that Stranger in the Soul. I've never really listened to that. So
yeah,
I don't know. I heard LA Connection. I've heard that too.
I'm just wondering with sometimes the contributions that you made to that band. Do you think you should have received more writing credits?
Of course, because the stuff I wrote. I mean, of course. But the nature of the business is, yeah. I kind of don't even want to go there. Yeah, sure, I should have. And then somebody says, sue me, and here I show up with a country boy lawyer that usually does divorces and domestic violence cases against Deep Purple Overseas Limited, with this staff of 100, and it's just not worth it. And
yeah, I guess. Is it true? Did you attended Purple's performance at the California Jam? You actually attended that performance?
No. I watched on TV. I wasn't in the audience.
Okay.
They broadcast it locally on TV.
I was curious to know what it would have actually been like being there, because we talked about Woodstock earlier.
Yeah.
And Billy Joel said it wasn't 3 days of music and peace; it was 3 days of BO and acid.
I almost. And that was my Woodstock story. I was on my way to Woodstock. I was 15. And I was trying to I was hitchhiking with a buddy.
Wow.
Because I was living in Connecticut, and this was 2 hours up the road in New York State, and
the traffic was backed up for
miles, and there was public service announcements. Don't go to Woodstock. It's a disaster. It's a health hazard, and it's dangerous, and hippies this and hippies that. And I was 15.
Yeah.
Didn't have a driver's license, and so I never made Woodstock. The California Jam was absolutely. I mean, I just loved that. I mean, he smashed a $100,000 camera. This wasn't like a guy with an iPhone, phoning the show. This is when TV cameras cost $100,000 and they were this big. And he'd apparently warned the guy, to stay away from me, and. The guitar through the camera. Then I guess they put too much TNT in his Marshall box. It blew Ian Pace's glasses off across the stage. So I thought, that was great.
Yeah,
that's entertainment,
Yeah, there's that famous story when the Who was it the Smothers? I can't remember what they were on some TV show, and Keith Moon put way
Top of the Pop. That was Top of the Pops, I think.
I can't remember what it was, but I know Keith Moon put too much explosive in his drum.
Yeah.
Pete Townsend says that permanently damaged his hearing.
I've also heard that John Entwistle permanently damaged his hearing, and I stood in front of John Entwistle in 1979 at an open air here in Germany, and wow, I mean, this is the loudest and best bass player you've ever heard in your life. That man was loud and solid.
He was incredible.
And, even our stage volume, Rainbow, we weren't, for me, that loud, because my loudspeaker system, the tweeter where the high frequencies come out, they were taller than I am. So, I wasn't getting the stuff that hurts.
Yeah.
And I pitied the audience because I know how loud it was out front. My mother was at a Rainbow show and she said, she was shocked at how loud it was. But
Well, interesting. Roger Daltrey, in his autobiography, says that the Who were playing too loud. So as a singer, it was really difficult. And he says that the Who live at Leeds, which is arguably the finest live album ever, as far as I'm concerned, he says it's not his favourite. He thinks that the recording, the Who live at Hull, was a much better album. I don't know if
I
you.
tell you what solved that problem. Live at Leeds is fabulous. I mean, of course, I grew up with it. I mean, anything Who related, I'm right there. And those are my guys. But what saved singers is, first of all, the advent of really, really big PA systems.
Yeah.
I mean, the Beatles played Shea Stadium with a PA you wouldn't put in a old folks club for Sunday afternoon dance. You couldn't hear them. All you could hear is screaming girls, and they couldn't hear themselves. And now the idea is to have your stage volume. All these Marshall stacks that you see, like Yngwie using, they're all dummies. They don't even have speakers in them. They're just
for show.
And it's show business, and they that's the vibe he wants to project. But he's really using one amplifier. Mm-hmm. He's got one microphone. He's got 45 Marshall cabinets, and you can see one microphone hanging down. The idea these days is to keep your stage volume as low as possible, and then what the guy out front does, that's his business, how loud it wants to be. But what saves singers is in-ear monitoring. Because first of all, it's a built-in shield against the worst thing on stage is a crash cymbal from a drummer. Believe it or not, it's the most damaging frequency, more than any lead guitar or anything. It's standing next to a loud drum, Cozy Powell next to a loud drummer is definitely hard for your hearing. But so in-ear monitoring cuts all of that out like a normal pair of headphones, and you can have your own vocal as loud as you want it. Yeah. And if you can hear it really, really well, then you don't strain yourself as much, and your tuning's better, and you don't have this feeling that you're fighting, you're trying to be heard in this chaos. You can hear yourself. You can get your own monitor mix and turn yourself up as loud as you want. So
yeah,
that saved everything for me, by the way, too. I mean, my ears are fine. I had them measured. I've got. I'll be 70. I've got your usual old farts. There's a dip there, but nothing like tinnitus or deafness.
Yeah. George Harrison said the Beatles saved the world from boredom. Would you agree with him?
I was never bored in my life. I would say, I would answer that with John Steinbeck saved the world from boredom. But whatever. I mean, these are all things that people say in a moment, and the myth grows. It's like putting a piece of sand in an oyster. 15 years later, you got a black pearl. That's just whatever. People say all kinds of stuff. Is what I'm saying.
My favorite one is Frank Zappa said, "Jazz isn't dead; it just smells funny."
I like that too. Those are all great nuggets.
Yeah.
But a lot of this was like pre-internet, and people would get this out of these quotes out of music magazines or radio interviews or whatever. But I mean, there's one of Ronnie Dio, and he's in his trailer, on his tour bus.
Yeah.
In a pissed off mood. He's got a whiskey and coke in his hand, and you can tell he's pissed off. He starts off by screaming at the bus driver because they work on this fucking bus, that kind of thing.
Right.
Not in a great mood, and he disparages most of his catalog.
Yeah, he says some bad things about Rainbow Rising. He says half of it's shit.
For example, including Stargazer. So people say stuff. Everybody says stuff. I certainly don't want to be judged on something I could just throw out there in the general conversation, especially in a foreign country with he helped the interviewer set the microphone up. If you've seen the clip, it was like all, do I need this? Yeah, he was, he's doing his job. Okay, I'll do the interview. But
one of the
stuff
great
never goes away.
No, that's true. Especially, one of my favorites is James Brown said of Elvis Presley, he's just a hillbilly that discovered the blues.
I love it. I love it. Of course. I mean, yeah.
I've only got one more question for you. I'm just want to ask you about the state of rock and roll with all this controversy about bands playing to tapes and miming
This
and
is fantastic that you mentioned that because I wanted to talk about that.
yeah, excellent.
Okay. So, Band X announces they can't play their show because their laptops are stolen.
Yeah, yeah.
Loudmouth Y says they're pussies because they can't play live. And
Hmm.
really loudmouth Z, who happens to be a big podcaster,
Yeah, yeah.
weighs in on it
Yeah,
and
yeah.
starts making rules.
Okay.
There are no rules in life other than laws. There are no rules in art, that is for sure.
Sure.
And a couple of things. First thing is a lot of shows these days are controlled. The lighting is controlled. Uh, they fly in tapes. This is true, and not tapes, it's files, but they
Yeah,
fly
yeah.
them in. The show literally can't run without a computer, and especially if the band's using pyrotechnics.
Hmm.
Would you rather trust if you're standing next to all this dynamite, like
Yeah.
at a Ramstein show, you really want to trust the guy to do it 100 times in a row right when you know a machine will do it like a million times in a row right? I mean,
Sure, sure.
you need the technology. But listen, if you people are playing arenas, it's a show. It's like saying, man, in Guardians of the Galaxy, how'd they teach that raccoon to fly the spaceship? Yeah,
Hmm.
it's show business. It's a show.
Yeah, yeah.
So anytime you start making rules, and then rule one was this guy probably wasn't playing bass live on, you know what I mean, and for a stadium full of, so who gives a shit? Certainly not the kids in this football stadium, 70,000 kids.
Yeah,
Everybody liked the show, or they wouldn't have bought the extravagantly priced ticket.
yeah.
The state of rock and roll is if you want to see warts and all rock and roll, you got to get to a band before they've made it, and
Yeah.
go to a club, have a few beers, watch them fuck up, make mistakes, try stuff out.
Yeah.
But by the time they get to the point where they're playing football stadiums or even hockey rinks, their arenas, it's show business. And I tell you, the only objection that I have to running a show like that, I don't care if the if the lead singer lip syncs if his voice is blown out. Who cares? I mean, it's a show.
Uh-huh.
Okay, I don't want to know how the sausage is made. If it tastes good. But the one thing it kills is spontaneity, because if your show is running on a timeline you're playing exactly the same set every night. I mean, you could change the set list around, but you're playing them exactly the same length. And that to me sounds like the most boring thing in the world. I've never played the same thing twice in my life. And
Do you think live music was healthier in the 70s than it was?
hell yes. I mean, hell yes. But tickets were $7. They weren't $700. I mean, and improvisational rock music like Rainbow or it all dates back to jazz. Miles Davis came with Bitches Brew in about 1970.
Hmm.
I think it was 70. Changed my life, changed my approach to music making and I saw him with they had that Keith Jarrett. They were loud. They were loud as any rock band. He had the electronic trumpet. He'd stand there like a conductor and just point at people, say, "You're up, you're up, you're up," and it's all happening in that moment.
Yeah.
And there wasn't 5,000 kids standing there like watching it through a device either. They were watching what was going on, and it was an immersive moment. Something you're a part of something that's unique that will never happen the same way again.
Yeah.
So in that sense, the glory days of rock and roll were 70s and 80s. And, yeah.
Yeah.
But to this whole quote controversy with all these guys vying for public attention by moving the goalposts constantly, it's a useless conversation because it's show and
Yeah.
business. It's a show and
I
it's a
know.
business.
As the price as well. I mean, I wanted to. big Billy Joel fan. I wanted to get a ticket to see his London show in Hyde Park,
Yeah.
but I wanted a ticket where I'd actually see him rather than watching it on a big screen.
Yeah.
Really expensive tickets, and
How expensive?
oh, I know. I think about 400, 500, about 300, 400 pounds, which is what's that in? But the thing is, when I want to take my daughter as well, then you need to not
Yeah.
get a hotel.
Yeah.
It's the price of a holiday, a
It's
family
the price.
holiday.
I was just to say it's the price of a family holiday for a
So,
week.
so I
You can
just go
fly,
to those.
you can fly down to the Canary Islands take both kids and the wife and go a half pension and get you breakfast and dinner and then wander around the island all day for the
Yeah,
price of 3 hours of Billy Joel. I'm a huge Billy Joel fan too, and Bruce Springsteen,
uh,
and and I see who's doing the business. And Taylor Swift broke the
hmm
internet, and okay, she's great, whatever. Beyonce broke the internet with this pricing system. But I will say, as in defense of that,
hmm
if music isn't worth anything in its recorded form, which it
Yeah, that's
isn't,
true.
it's free.
There's
I
no
mean,
money made from
there,
recording music now.
no, there's no record labels. You don't need a record label.
Yeah,
There's a statistic that I looked up this morning. Uh, on Spotify alone, there are 80 million individual songs, adding 100,000 songs a day.
yeah.
There are 100,000 new songs a day going over Spotify. I mean, too much information, no chance to break through. So if you can make it, if you got enough people that'll pay a couple $100 to see you in a comfortable theater, and if you can afford it, go for it. Otherwise, it kind of took the common man out of what rock and roll used to be. I mean, the punter, you'd say in
But
British.
do you not think it's quite ironic though that Springsteen seemed to make a career out of singing about the fate and of the working blue collar working man?
Yeah,
Those are the people that are excluded from seeing him.
yeah, but he not only does he admit to that, he laughs. I mean, he says I'm a phony. He says I'm singing. He says I grew up like completely middle class and everything, and I'm singing as if I ever worked a day in my life. I didn't. As a musician. He it's not that he thinks he's fooling anybody. He sees the irony as well. Uh, I he's a band that doesn't need tapes. He's got like 15 people on
Brilliant.
stage.
Oh, no, it's brilliant live.
Best
Band.
best piano player. Danny Federici was the best my favorite organ player. He died. The new guy's great too.
Yeah,
Clarence died, but I guess it's his nephew. It's
yeah.
great too. He's 74.
It's still
74
great
years
live, still
old.
great though. Absolutely still, performance. It's
The boss. You might call him the boss.
yeah, I think we will have to. Anyway, I'm gonna let you. I think you said you wanted to take a nap or something
Oh,
after.
don't say that. I didn't mean that. I mean that I want to go to the gym and do my Pilates.
Ah, okay, okay. Well, you can do that as well. Um,
Very nice talking to you.
nice talking to you as well. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah.
You enjoy the rest of your day.